I'm Ray Dalio, founder of Bridgewater Associates and author of Principles, Life Work, Ask Me Anything. There is so much to talk about in this unique time. I'm especially interested in discussing with you principles of life, work, economics, and investing, as it applies to what's going on now. If you're interested in my really big picture perspective, you might want to read my piece The Changing World Order, which is on LinkedIn and you might ask me about. Dear Ray, Michael Burry has come out saying that the pandemic could unwind the passive investment boom. Does he mean popular index trackers and ETFs like Vanguard? And if these just track indices like the S&P 500, how can it unwind without the underlying indices unwinding? Also, which currencies would you be buying currently for a medium-term outlook? Many thanks, Charlie. You'll have to speak to Michael Burry about what he means, as I wouldn't presume to know. However, concerning passive versus active investing and ETFs, I think smart active investors will now have a great opportunity to outperform them because of how different the conditions of the companies and items in them are from one another. I think we have entered a period in which the usual generalizations that index trackers and ETFs are created around will be much less important than the individual conditions within them. I think that the ETFs and index funds contribute to the inefficiencies, because the selling and buying of them affects all of the items in them without regard for those items' differences. Hi Ray. You've talked a lot about cycles of leveraging and deleveraging throughout the 20th century within Principles, big debt crises in terms of the economic machine. I was wondering what your thoughts were about the current market environment relative to these concepts with respect to the domestic US and global economy. Thanks. I will answer your question in brief, but hope that you will read my comprehensive explanation of how money and credit cycles have worked throughout history, which I expect to put on LinkedIn and principles.com in the next couple of days. Or if you want a quicker, more entertaining take on this, watch How the Economic Machine Works on YouTube. In brief, now, like in the 1930 to 1945 period, interest rates have hit 0% and printing money and buying financial assets doesn't get the money and credits to go where policymakers want it to go. So the central government borrows a lot and the central bank prints a lot of money and creates a lot of credit to buy this debt, which the central government spends to target what they want to save. The US government, including the central government and the central bank, is in the unique position of being able to provide the money and credit that the world needs, because the US dollar is the world's dominant reserve currency. While the US accounts for about 20% of the world economy, the US dollar accounts for about 70% of the world's buying, selling, borrowing, and lending. Those who will get dollars, and to a lesser extent euros, and to a much lesser extent yen, who need this money and credit to make up for their lost income and inability to pay debts, will benefit more than those who will not get this money and credit, such as those in emerging countries. I believe that increasingly there will be questions by bondholders who are receiving negative real and nominal interest rates while there is a lot of printing of money about whether the debt assets they are holding are good strongholds of wealth. I believe that cash, which is non-interest bearing money, will not be the safest asset to hold. I really appreciate your research, summarization and writing. Could you share more about your process? For instance, how do you schedule time for writing and research? How do you decide what to read? How do you take notes? Do you need to force yourself to write or does it come naturally? Could you share some tips for the people who feel they have something to say, but find it hard to have the motivation or can't find the right process? The way I research and write is an iterative process in which I delve into the subject in various ways, write down what I think, triangulate it with the world's greatest experts who I ask to tear it apart or offer new ideas that I miss to stress test it, do more research, writing, and triangulating until I reach the point of diminishing returns. However, I never stop this process, because I never adequately learn to satisfy my important curiosities. What I read is typically those books and other sources of information which are written by brilliant experts in the areas that I'm drawn to learn more about. As far as how I schedule my time, I have a number of strategic objectives that I am unwaveringly on a path to accomplish and pursue in a highly variable way that is optimized for the trade-offs that I spend at the moment. More generally, I have a deep sense of responsibility to others who are partners in my pursuing my passions, such as those I work with and our investors and their beneficiaries, as I attempt to understand the world, the economy, and the markets, and then successfully bet on what they will do. Of course, my family, my closest friends, and my other treasured relationships led me to spend time in ways that are appropriate to them. I do a lot and I love it, and I benefit a lot from the help of others who provide leverage to me. What is the meaning of life? I believe that it is to evolve and contribute to evolution. I think that is true for everything in the universe, which does these things in an interactive, perpetual motion sort of way through time. I believe that nature naturally rewards us with the gratification of doing it well. Hi Ray, big fan of yours. A few months ago you said cash is trash. But now cash is king. What gives? I'm glad you asked so that I can clarify. Back then, and still now, I believe that central banks will print a lot of money and keep cash interest rates at such low levels that they will have negative real returns and negative returns relative to assets that behave well in times of reflation. When the virus hit and it had its negative impact on earnings and balance sheets, asset values plummeted, which made cash look comparatively attractive. However, what did the central banks do? They created a ton more cash to buy debt and push interest rates lower, which is having the effect of pushing those assets that will be better suited for the new environment up. When you think about what assets are safe to own, and you think of cash, please remember that while it doesn't move around in value as much as other assets, there is a costly negative return to it in relation to goods and services and other financial assets that amounts to about a couple of % a year, which adds up. So I still think that cash is trash relative to other alternatives, particularly those that will retain their value or increase their value during reflationary periods, for example, some gold and some stocks. Who have you spoken to recently that surprised or inspired you with their perspective and approach to the current crises? What did they say? How did it impact you? Those who surprised and inspired me the most pertaining to the crisis were those who ran into the fire to help. We each have contact with different people who do this, so I will only touch on the ones that I've had direct contact with. They include healthcare workers, because I'm on a hospital board which allows me to have an inside picture, teachers of the poorest students who are finding ways to educate them despite the obstacles presented by poverty, because of the work that my wife, teachers, and others are doing for disengaged and disconnected high schoolers in CT, small merchants, through my window in microfinance through Green America, and people, companies, and even other countries, who are significantly contributing, but remaining anonymous, partially because of their preference for anonymity and partially because of their fears of being attacked. However, I am most impressed by folks who are on the front lines and in often cases suffering financially, but are unwaveringly doing the right things to help others. In chapter 1 of The Changing World Order, you wrote, "Those countries who believe that having peace and savoring life are more important than having a lot of wealth and power wouldn't think of fighting hard enough to gain enough of the wealth and power to make it into the group included in this study. In your own life, how have you thought about pursuing peace and savoring life versus pursuing wealth and power? Please keep thinking and writing. I love your work. I think that pursuing peace and savoring life, rather than fighting over wealth and power, is much wiser. I don't believe that most people in most places where the culture habituates fighting over wealth and power truly appreciates the alternative. I think a lot about what money is worth and believe that it has no intrinsic value. So to answer this, one must look beyond it to ask oneself what is most important to have that money can buy. I believe that for most people, it starts with taking care of oneself and one's family. That is, their basic health, education, and maintenance needs. Then the needs of those who are closest around them, and increasingly those beyond them, which includes the greater community. The more that happens and the more important these others become relative to oneself, the more peaceful and harmonious the society is. For these reasons, I believe that how we will behave with each other will determine our society's fate. There is more than enough wealth to go around to take care of most people's basic health and education needs, which, if done well, will raise the society's productivity and increase the size of the pie. Thank you for sharing your time to answer our questions. I am curious about O-Sinks and your plans for the future. I have never been in a Triton sub, just those with a few small viewports, but the view looks amazing. How do scientists, explorers, educators or artists become involved in O-Sinks fieldwork? Do you provide financial support or operate like the Schmidt Ocean Institute, which grants access to the ship and research equipment at no cost? Also, can you comment on the progress of MV Alucia 2 and any interest you may have in the 5D ship and submersible DSSV pressure drop and the DSV limiting factor? O-Sinks, which is our endeavor to support ocean exploration and the awareness of it, provides financial support to scientists, explorers, educators, and artists as well as creates mind-blowing media that allows viewers to accompany these people under the sea. The media takes many forms. For example, National Geographic, the BBC, and Disney, with the oversight of the remarkable director and ocean explorer James Cameron, will be capturing these explorations in a Jacques Cousteau type series which will be made broadly available on National Geographic and other media distribution outlets. Beyond that, there will be plenty of social media, which you can get by following O-Sinks, and exhibitions, such as that which you can see at the American Museum of Natural History and other museums. Alucia 2, which we now call Oceans Plura, is nearing completion and will set sail this summer. If you're interested, you can follow O-Sinks on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube. Subscribe and click the notification bell to get the best of British.